Once upon a time, there was a small town nestled in the heart of a dense forest. The people who lived there were a close-knit community, and they were all well aware of the legend that surrounded the forest. It was said that the forest was home to a vengeful spirit, known as the Lady in White. The story went that the Lady in White was once a beautiful young woman who had been wronged by her lover. In her grief and despair, she had taken her own life in the forest, and her spirit had been trapped there ever since. It was said that on certain nights, the Lady in White would appear to those who dared to venture into the forest. She would lure them deeper and deeper into the forest, until they were lost and unable to find their way out. One dark and stormy night, a group of teenagers decided to venture into the forest. They had heard the legend of the Lady in White, but they didn't believe in such stories. They thought it would be fun to explore the forest and see if they could find any evidence of the spirit. As they made their way through the forest, the wind howled and the trees creaked ominously. The darkness seemed to be closing in around them, and they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Suddenly, they saw a figure in the distance. It was a woman, dressed in a flowing white gown. She seemed to be beckoning to them, calling out their names in a sweet, musical voice. The teenagers were both fascinated and terrified. They couldn't resist following the woman, even though they knew it was a terrible idea. They stumbled through the underbrush, the thorns and branches scratching at their skin. As they drew closer to the woman, they realized that something was off. Her face was twisted into a grotesque mask of fury, and her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. The teenagers tried to run, but it was too late. The Lady in White had ensnared them in her trap. She led them deeper and deeper into the forest, her voice echoing around them. They stumbled through the darkness, their hearts pounding in their chests. They could hear strange noises all around them, the rustling of leaves and the creaking of branches. It was as if the forest was alive, and it was closing in around them. Finally, they stumbled into a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a large, ancient tree with gnarled roots and twisted branches. The Lady in White stood before the tree, her arms outstretched. The teenagers tried to run, but they couldn't move. It was as if the forest itself had trapped them. The Lady in White began to chant, her voice rising to a fever pitch. The wind began to howl, and the branches of the tree began to writhe and twist. Suddenly, the ground beneath the teenagers' feet opened up, and they were plunged into darkness. They tumbled down into a deep pit, their screams echoing through the forest. When they finally hit the bottom, they found themselves in a chamber made of stone. The walls were covered in strange, runic symbols, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. They could hear something moving in the darkness, something that whispered and hissed. And then they saw her. The Lady in White stood before them, her eyes blazing with fury. She told them that they were to be her playthings, forever trapped in the forest, never to leave. The teenagers tried to scream, but no sound came out. They were trapped in the darkness, with only the Lady in White and her whispers for company. And as they cowered in fear, they knew that they would never be seen or heard from again. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. The families of the missing teenagers searched high and low for them, but there was no sign of their whereabouts. It was as if they had vanished without a trace. The people of the town began to whisper that the Lady in White had claimed more victims, that she had taken the teenagers as her own. They warned their children not to venture too far into the forest and to stay away from the ancient tree where the Lady in White was said to reside. But still, some were foolish enough to ignore the warnings. They would venture into the forest, thinking that they were invincible. They would laugh at the legend of the Lady in White, thinking that it was just a story. And one by one, they would disappear. Their families would search for them, but they would never be found. It was as if the forest was swallowing them whole, never to be seen or heard from again. And so, the legend of the Lady in White lived on, a cautionary tale for those who dared to venture into the forest. The people of the town knew that the spirit was real, that she was not just a myth or a story. They knew that the forest was a dangerous place, full of traps and snares. And they knew that the Lady in White was watching, waiting for her next victims to come to her. They knew that the forest was her domain, and that they could never truly be safe as long as they lived there.